Hey, what is up, guys? So, welcome to the first episode of the Rewired Experience podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Stoy. A little bit about my background: police officer for over 20 years, SWAT for 12, was in the military, did a combat tour in Afghanistan, hit an IED during my tour, and almost lost my right leg. Sent me on a journey of self-discovery, basically, is a way that what it comes down to. The last probably 8 years, my wife and I have been running a health and wellness business, and it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. I've been on my own journey. And only recently, probably in the last few months, do I feel like I've found a groove with my business. And a big part of that has been the holistic approach to my own healing. And of course, there's always a book, right? So I'm in the process of writing a book on a system that I've used in my own healing process. So in that healing process, I've used what I learned, and I'll go into the backstory here in just a little bit, but what I call take a knee, drink water, Charlie Mike. This comes from my military background. Obviously, my tactical background and how I approach things usually comes from that standpoint. And so there's a little bit more to that system, to that mantra that has become a system. And if you've been to some of my business seminars where I was a keynote, one of my business trainings, you've probably heard me use this system, this mantra, this way of kind of explaining my journey in healing. And so I want to go into a little bit more background and then really dive into the first part of that, which is take a knee, right? Went through in my training as an officer, I went through something called Leader Forge. Leader Forge is really just a condensed version of Ranger School. And it's a big part, it's the culmination of what all commissioned infantry officers go through in their training process to test their mettle, if you will. And by design, it's meant to be a precursor to Ranger School. And what they do is they take it and they condense Ranger School into basically a week-long exercise. And the schoolhouse portion of it is put into play. And it's meant to basically take everything you've learned and put it to work. So what it entails is a week of very little food, poor nutrition, very little sleep, and a lot of mission planning, a lot of physical demands on your body. And it definitely tests your limitations or perceived limitations of what your capabilities are as a leader for sure, but then just as a person getting through it. At one time, I don't know currently what the statistics are, but at one time it was much more likely that a commissioned officer would make it through Ranger School with a one-time go than a non-commissioned. And the reason is this program. Basically what it is, it's a preparatory course. If you're an officer and you get to Ranger School and you have to recycle multiple times, like there's something in Leader Forge that you didn't get. There's something in the first phase of your training that you didn't get. Most officers, not that they don't recycle, they do, but most of them have at least had a taste of what to expect. And in some circles, Ranger qualified infantrymen will tell you that Leader Forge is a little bit harder than Ranger School in the sense that it was a condensed version of it, and a lot of suck condensed into a small portion of time. There may be different schools of thought on that. I'm not saying that everybody that's Ranger qualified is going to take that position, but I'm telling you, a lot of the guys I talked to, that's the way they felt. But during this, you rotate through leadership positions. So I was in that role to lead a mission, and I was tired. It was like, I don't know how many hours, probably 72 hours or so into this thing. And we were doing multiple movements, multiple missions with full combat load, which sometimes is well over 100 pounds, depending on what equipment you're carrying, plus your water, food, all those things, right? Not only that, but you're trying to lead an element of guys who are also extremely tired, hungry, hangry, right? All the challenges in a group dynamic that you can imagine, and then put everybody under extreme stress. This is just a condensed version of what Ranger School is meant to do. And so we're doing this movement where I was in charge, and we get to what's called an ORP, an objective rally point. Basically what it is, this is a fallback point, right? Where if something goes bad, we all fall back. Also a place for us to regroup, get necessary equipment together, drop unnecessary equipment we don't need, and then go ahead and assault the objective. So I'm in this ORP and I get everybody into position, which is like a 360 security position. And I think I'm not thinking that much about it. Or one of my instructors, one of the sergeants, we call them black hats, or they might be ranger instructors that are actually instructing the course. And he comes up to me and he's, "Hey, Lieutenant." And I was like, "Yeah, Sergeant." He's like, "What's wrong with what I'm seeing?" And I kind of look around and I honestly just did not see it. I didn't see anything wrong with the way that I had set up the ORP. I wasn't able to see it. And I looked at him and I was like, "I don't know, Sergeant." I said, "It looks okay to me. Enlighten me," basically, paraphrasing what I said. And this is a cool part under his breath. We're away from the rest of the team. So he doesn't undermine me as a leader at all. And he was like, "Hey, look at the terrain." And in the terrain, there were depressions all over the place. So there's basically almost like little ditches in the terrain. And I had all my guys just laying on top of these ditches, like plain sight, no covering concealment. My whole team was just out in the open, basically, when there was options available for cover and concealment. And I just didn't see it because I was in it. I was deep in the suck. And what he said to me in that moment changed my life. He said, "Take a knee, drink water, reshoot your azimuth and Charlie Mike." Now, this is what I'm going to talk about today. I want to dive into what I mean when I say take a knee. Okay. And what he was trying to say is take a knee isn't just to preface this. Take a knee a lot of times can have a lot of connotations. Maybe it's submission. Maybe it's in protest or worship or a lot of different things. To me, it was about changing my perspective, looking at what I was seeing from a different perspective. And he was physically saying take a knee. But what's funny is I was already on my knee. So I'm already on my knee. And then he used this metaphor, this mantra that I'm sure he had told multiple different trainees, right? Multiple different lieutenants coming through this program, probably different rangers that he had put through actual ranger school or trained during actual ranger school. Hey, if you're out there and you're listening to this, Sergeant, I don't even remember your name, but you changed my life. And it all made sense to me. It all made sense because he was saying change your perspective. Like you're not seeing it because you're deep in the suck. And so I definitely metaphorically took a knee in that moment, repositioned my team. And from there, we carried out the mission and it was successful. But what I really want to talk to you guys about is when you have your own sort of life challenges, right? And somebody I want to shout out again, Jason Redman, who's written the book, The Trident and Overcome. He talks about getting off the X. Very similar concept here, to what he talks about in his book. So I highly recommend those books by Jason Redman. He calls them life ambushes. And, these things that happen in your life, right, that cause you to lose perspective. So how do you regain that perspective? Because stress and exhaustion are going to blur our ability to see obvious situations. So all of these things that come from these life situations, it changes or it affects your ability to look at them rationally, look at them pragmatic. So you've got to take a knee and change your perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean you're taking a step back. But what it does mean is that you're looking at things a different way. It may be taking a step back, and we can revisit that in a minute. But for me, in my journey after I hit the IED, they told me, they were like, "Look, Kyle, you're probably going to come back in 18 months. I was a limb salvage. My heel was effectively blown off my foot. They're like, "You're probably going to come back in 18 months and you're going to ask us to amputate your foot." And there was just no way I had a powerful why behind that, why that wasn't going to happen, why I didn't let that happen. And I'll reconnect with that later on. That goes with another piece of the mantra. For me, that stuck with me for a long time because I was just focusing on the wrong things. Just like when I made the decision in Leader Forge, I was tired, I was hungry. That's what I was focused on. I was focused on the pain, right? I wasn't focused on how I was going to do the best job for my team, keeping them alive, essentially. This is a training exercise. This wasn't a real combat mission, but still, if we train as we fight, my focus should have been the same thing. And it should have been on basically executing the mission effectively and then also taking care of my team, right? And that's not where my focus was. My focus was on the fact that I was tired. I was hungry. Me focused, not we focused. And so By taking a knee, it enabled me by changing my perspective and enabled me to look at what was important. And some of the things that you may be looking at this and you're like, well, I can't relate to that. And the reality is everyone can relate to it. You lose focus in the suck, right? Anytime you're struggling, anytime things in your business, your personal life, your personal health, whatever the case may be, aren't going the way that you planned them, then you're in the suck. And that's when it definitely gets harder to make educated decisions and really, again, change that perspective so that you can make focused, emotionally regulated decisions so that you can move forward. And for me, taking responsibility of that, and again, that's what part of taking a knee is taking personal responsibility for what you can control. And, there was a lot of time where I spent a lot of time dwelling on my injury. And it didn't really come after I hit my goals. And we'll talk a little bit about goal focus too later on. But, after I hit some of my goals and I was up and moving, that's when the real battle started. Because it was really easy for me to acknowledge my own limitations or perceived limitations, or just acknowledge the injury in general. Right. And so for me, the biggest takeaway here, especially from a leadership perspective, is this. When you take a knee, understand you're changing your perspective. Understand that a big part of that is recognizing what you don't want to think about all the time, right? And that's how uncomfortable you are and what your perceived limitation are now, or perceived limitation is. Now, keep this in mind. Recognizing that and dwelling on it are two different things. I'm giving you permission to recognize it, but it just doesn't need lip service. Okay. So when I was working in my nutrition business and we were opening up our stores, I'd be in there for 12 hours sometimes in a day. And at the end of the day, I would have to ice my foot so that I could not limp home, essentially limp to my car, drive home and limp home. So I'd have some kind of quality of life once I got home with my kids and my family. But one of the things I would do, I'd take a picture of it. I'd be like, look, guys, I'm having to ice my ankle in a bucket of ice before I go home. I worked so hard today, blah, 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 right? I guess maybe a piece of me thought, hey, by acknowledging obstacle that I have, maybe people will respect me more, right? Because I'm having to overcome this obstacle. But here's the thing. From a leadership perspective, this is really important. Your team doesn't care. Not that they don't care about you. They care about you, but they don't care what your obstacles are. Why? Because they've got their own obstacles. Here's another great example. My wife, and babe, forgive me if you're listening, she's dyslexic and she never talks about it. She never talks about it. Not that she doesn't make excuses. Sometimes we all do, but that's not one she makes. If she doesn't understand something, a concept, if she's not grasping something fast, I know because I'm her husband, I'm her best friend, that that she has this thing, but she doesn't say, I'm dyslexic, so it takes me longer to learn this concept and blah, blah, blah. That never comes out of her mouth. She knows it. She's already acknowledged that she's got this obstacle, but what she doesn't do is use it as an excuse to let everybody else know why she's maybe falling short in some area. One of my team leaders one time told me, he was talking to me about, I had failed a promotion exam. And one of my SWAT team leaders, I was in conversation. He goes, man, what happened? You're one of the most capable leaders on this team. We need you to pass this promotion exam. And I said, I'm just a bad test taker. And he stopped me. He goes, what? He goes, no, you're not. You're a bad test preparer. So my point to you would be, regardless of your obstacles, right? You're not a bad test taker. You're not bad at whatever it is. You're just bad at preparing for it. Now, your preparation may be harder than somebody else's, but that is what makes you uniquely you. Your obstacles, the cross you bear, is what makes you uniquely you. Everybody has something. And it doesn't matter if you think your something is worse than somebody else's something. The reality is that it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme because everybody has something, right? I bring that up to say this. You can't dwell on your perceived obstacles as your excuses. And true leadership is really about refusing to dwell on those perceived limitations And it's about working through challenges without using them as crutches. Okay. When life gets tough, we're going to take a knee. This is what I want you guys to take away from this. When life gets tough, we're going to take a knee. You're going to step back, reassess your situation, and don't linger on your hardships. There's no reason to be there for any longer than it takes to change your perspective, take care of some things, redetermine your direction, and then continue on the mission. It's going to help you see new opportunities or solutions that you couldn't see before. If you're so deep in the suck that you can't see your way out, you're in a prison of your own perceived limitations. And I hope maybe this thought process helps you free yourself from that prison, because I was in that prison for a long time. And if I'm being completely honest, I was in that prison multiple times in my life. Whenever I thought that dwelling and unpacking something, spending a lot of time dwelling on some issue, instead of just taking a knee, drinking water, reshooting my azimuth and Charlie Mike and continue that mission, right? If I would have adopted that a little bit sooner, if I would have figured this out a little bit sooner, right, I could have maybe changed how much time, because time is precious, how much time I spent dwelling on those issues and my own limitations to move forward in life. I'm 50 years old. I'm still discovering so much, right? So here's my challenge to you. I want you guys to ask yourselves to think about a current challenge where you've lost perspective. Maybe it's in your family, your marriage. Maybe it's in your business. Maybe it's on your own health and wellness journey, which is huge for so many people. I want you to just take a knee and reflect on your own perspective. Are you spending too much time unpacking your own perceived obstacles? Are you a prisoner to your own perceived limitations? Avoid making excuses and think about how you can change your approach. Is there something different that you can do that you're just not seeing because you're deep in the suck? It's hard, guys. I get it. I'm telling you something that you probably already know, but my hope is that maybe I'm putting it into a perspective or a metaphor that makes sense for you and makes sense to you in this journey. So that's all I've got for this episode. I'm really excited about bringing the rest of this to you guys. I'm thinking I'll probably do some content once a week here, starting out. And so next week, we're going to visit the drink water portion of what I really consider a structure for how I tackle obstacles in my life. And at some point I'll spend a little more time maybe unpacking my story with you guys. My hope is maybe bring some people on to the podcast, have some interviews, but this is just a launching point. Nothing fancy here. I'm just sitting in my office with a Bluetooth microphone and my iPhone, guys. And, just get out there and do it. Change your perspective, get out there and do it. Thank you so much if you've listened all the way through. And I'm excited to go ahead and share the next episode of our podcast, which will be Drink Water of the Rewired Experience. And man, we'll talk to you guys soon.